Alright, so I've got the 20 hangers here ready to start processing and thinning out the slightest bit. I've done all my figuring over here about what size everything needs to be and how much material I need to remove. And I've decided that I would be using the table saw instead of the router table. It's interesting, one of the reasons we started making videos was so that we could go back and watch our thought process on stuff. And this is one of those cases where after I was editing and watched the video, I realized that the table saw had a lot more to offer than I was giving it credit for. The biggest was it just had this good fence already here, whereas if I was to use the router table, we'd have to go and build a fence to make this work. And that with the use of a jig, I could actually get this to be really consistent. So that's what I've made. I've made this jig here. And so what it does, it has these tabs on the sides here, and these press the axles in like that, and it presses in. We've got this board here that presses the hanger in right there, and they are the width of the truck. This is an older one. It's a little different size. There we go. And it just fits in pretty snug. There, just like that. And I'm able to use one of these push rods to push it in, and a second push rod to push it forward. And I'm able to get a really good, nice, consistent cut using that. And it all seems like it's going to be really good. If we go over here, here we've got this board. This is my Braincleaner, and I've just cut some pieces for the shim so I can tell the thickness. And if I stick this in here, it is just right. I can feel it. I can feel that it's got pressure on it, but there's very little resistance on it, and it is very good. So I've got just about the perfect size. It's dialed and it's consistent. There was one problem I needed to solve with this table saw, and this is one of the big reasons why I was afraid of using it, because I've ran into this with wood a little bit. But when you're wanting to be really super ultra precise, the problem with the table saw blade is it's flimsy. It can flex sideways and deflect. Where if I grab a router bit real fast, a big old fat bit like this is so thick and solid, there's no way it can deflect to anywhere close to the same amount unless it's down to the way the router is mounted, or something like that. But so the issue I was running into was I'd run the hangers through, and they would go through, and this side, it would start off cutting here, and let's get a top down. So I'd start cutting, and on the front edge it would be all nice and accurate, but as I kept going, it would be deflecting the blade a tiny bit, and this trailing edge would be about 0.2 millimeters wider, which is small, but enough to make a difference. So I did a couple things to improve that. First thing I did is I just raised the blade as much as I feel safe doing, so that there's more width of the blade. That, I mean, because if it's pushing the blade from further down closer to the axle of the blade, then it's got a smaller lever arm, you know, from the axle. It's pushing from a closer distance, and it just has more support on the blade. The second thing I did was I would just spray down the hanger with some Windex to help it cut more cleanly and not get hot, because part of the problem was it would get partway through the cut and it would just start melting the plastic a little bit, and it wasn't removing material as efficiently as it could. So between raising the blade and keeping the plastic wet while I cut, that seems to have done the trick, and now I'm getting 0.02 millimeters of difference between each side, which is a whole factor or a whole order of magnitude smaller, which is much, much better. That's way, way better than the tolerances of the stock hangers. So I'm ready to start processing these. So how I'm going to do it is I'm going to start over at the sander over here, and I'm going to do something similar. I'm going to get the face just a little wet. I'm just going to press it up against the surface. I'm not going to move it or do anything because I'm just trying to get a flat surface. It doesn't matter if things are a little skewed. What's most important is that it's flat, because this is becoming a reference surface for the process over here. And then once I've got them all just taken enough off to make a flat surface, then I'll do the trim cut, and they'll be all cut to the exact right size, and that will be really, really nice to have hangers this precise. So let's get started. Alright, so that wasn't too bad. That took about 12 minutes. And these things are completely rock solid in how flat they feel now. Comparatively, like I said before, the other video they just roll. It was not a flat edge. This is quite good. So it ended up being a lot easier to melt these when I was doing a whole lot of them. So that slowed me down a bit. I ended up using a lot of Windex to keep everything cool and wet. So now I've just got to you do the other side on the table saw. So there we go. You can see it's a really nice, smooth fit. One of the advantages of doing all this is that even when there's just a small amount of surface still grabbing onto the hanger, it's still nice and tolerant and tight, and it's not rattling or loose at all, even though, you know, there's about a quarter of the normal surface area when it's down. And of course when it's here, it's just completely solid. And anyway, it's gonna be so nice. Something really interesting I think is very cool is on a lot of the hangers, removing the outside was able to expose some of the black plastic that was in the inside. So what happens is most of the hangers that we make, or that other pilot made, were black hangers, and they would just do these small runs of colors. And so there would be residual black in the injection machines. And so they would often be green on the outside with some black still on the inside, and that's been exposed. And I think that's really cool. That just kind of shows that there's been some additional processing that's happened on these things. And anyway, they look really, really nice. All right, so it is now just after 11 o'clock. I've been here several hours now. There's a couple more things I could do. One of the things I need to do is I need to trim all these bottles into shims and cut them and drill the holes into them. And I couldn't do that before because I needed the table saw to be set exactly where it was. I did not want to move it because I'd have to reset up my distances again, and I didn't have any spare trucks to adjust that on. And the other thing I need to do, I think I'll do this before I leave today. I need to chamfer this edge right here, because what'll happen. All right, perfect. So if you take a look at the shim here, and you look at this edge, what'll happen is this edge comes down and it's meeting on the shim. And the shim, if it ever gets caught like that, this can act kind of like a scissor action, and it can actually slice a chunk off the shim, and it'll get jammed inside, and it'll basically ruin the shim really fast. So what I've got to do is I've just got to put a nice chamfer along this whole edge, and then when I cut the shim that goes onto that side, I also just scrape a very slight chamfer on it as well, and that solves that. So I think I can do that tonight, because that's a very quick thing to do. It's just very quick. But then I think I will be done after that. So let me just do that. Alright, we take a look at the hanger, and it's just that slight little chamfer right there. That's all it needs, and that's good to go. So, I think that's the hangers all done. Now, the next thing I need to do is going to be on the base plates, where I'm going to put the Franken pegs in. And those are just extra bolts that stick out here and here. You can wrap the O-rings around so that you get a better. So if the O-rings are just in the middle, you get a certain amount of resistance. When you move it out to the sides, it moves more on the outsides than it does in the middle, and so you get a stronger resistance. So, yeah. So the Franken pegs, and that should be it. I've got to design the Franken pegs in, they're going to be 3D printed pegs that are just bolted on. So I've got to design that, and make a jig to tap to drill and tap all the hangers. But that'll be well worth it because it adds a whole bunch of flexibility in terms of your resistance and being able to get a lot more bushing-like resistance performance. So there we go. I think I'm going to check out for now. Longboard technology, over and out.